Good day to you, and welcome to another episode of An Arizona Podcast with me, your host, Jesse Ellerby. Today's episode, I'm going to share with you my observation of the American political system as a 43-year-old guy that used to run a political action committee. So my background, spent 4 years in the Marine Corps after 9/11, came home, got on the fire department, which was my dream job as a kid, and got hired by a small agency. We were able to take that small agency and take it from being volunteers, part-timers, and full-timers to an actual paid full-time professional fire department, similar to you see everywhere in Phoenix. It's an outskirt area, county islands, so there's not a lot of tax revenue there, right? So that's why they have a reduced fire coverage. So I was blessed to spend 15 years there and make that community stronger, safer, and better. And we did that through political action. What do I mean by that? Well, the firefighters are allowed to unionize, and this is a right-to-work state, so it's kind of a it's a very messy thing. People's conception of firefighters is absolutely driven by Hollywood and mainstream messaging. And I'm going to say this as a giant fan of the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan constantly says that the fire department is a type of socialism that we all agree upon, and he's completely incorrect with that assessment. It's an unnuanced and a very reductionist opinion. And from a guy who brings in so many great minds to think about things with a nuanced perspective, I'm going to explain how the fire service in America works. It's not a social service; it's a public service, right? And it is down to what a individual community does to take care of their fire service for the level of coverage that they have. I can say this is, if we're looking for experts, a guy who ran the political action committee, was a union vice president, battalion safety officer during the pandemic, taught at the academy, taught at the paramedic school. I can probably claim that my professional background makes me a relative, not expert, but I was a professional in one community in one state inside of our country. And the American Fire Service, 65% of it is volunteer firefighters. So it's not a type of socialism, period. It's a social service that an individual community procures for itself through political action. And we know that here in this state. So the Professional Firefighters of Arizona is the state level union. They have a complete political branch arm that then trains the local unions on how to take care of their own area, right? This is the republic. It's how it works. When we scream, this is what a democracy looks like, that's messaging to get us away from the concept of the republic and how it works. And that's kind of the basis of this whole episode today. So I want to give you that background on how I understand the fire department, how it's contrary to popular messaging, and then what we did, how it worked, and then what I learned about the system, and then how we can then action the system as voters, as with our civic duty, our civic rights, to put leaders in charge that are actually going to fix the system for us. Okay, so this isn't a shock value, whatever. This is a nuanced assessment of our current situation through ground level work. I don't want notoriety. I don't want fame. All right. I would rather be on my fire truck right now, taking care of the community I was blessed to take care of. That was my happiest place on the planet. I had to retire for moral and ethical reasons. We were doing both immoral and unethical things behind the scenes as union officers and officers during the pandemic. And then we started breaking laws. And I'm working on that through my own efforts. And I'm just going to leave it at that for this episode because that whole situation's gotten weird. And if you look at how I've posted, there's a reason it hasn't been a while. So me fighting local government is legitimately going on in my life right now. So I'll talk about that when I can. But what I'm getting at though is I built the system that put these people in place to increase our fire department's capability for our community. I did that because we didn't have anybody else that wanted to do it. I was a former U.S. Marine, relatively well-educated guy from the Phoenix area. I grew up in Scottsdale, which has a very, very good educational system, at least when I went through in the 90s, because of the affluence of the community. My grandparents predate that affluence, right? They moved out there in '63 when they got made fun of. And my grandmother worked at that school district, so she gave her best, and we had a really good school, and it taught us how to think for ourselves. It didn't just teach us how to memorize so that we can get funded, which is the current mechanism. My wife's in education, so I can speak to that, pretty in depth with a high degree of knowledge. But we're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well, because the way that our educational system works, it conditions people to memorize something so they can get an A on a test and move on. It doesn't teach them to critically think. The pursuits I had in my life and the educational place and time I came up, completely different, and therefore that's why our generation is a little bit different. I don't understand why people don't get that, right? I mean, these kids got everything given to them in a TV dinner versus for information. Everything's on a tablet, memorize, scroll. It's very paint by numbers, and it makes for bad paramedics, it makes for bad firefighters, it makes for bad voters, unfortunately. So, like I said, learned how the system works, was taught everything by the state level, and then took it to a small community, made it work, worked like hotcakes. I was amazed. I was like, it was too simple, and it didn't cost a lot of money. And we just made a voting block do what we told it to, because we put something on the sign that made everybody go, okay, I'll vote for that guy, and which is your firefighters support. Now, everybody in America, if you have an emergency, you're going to dial 911. You're hoping somebody like me shows up and that we're competent. That's a conversation for another day. So where I was working, we only had one truck that was competent, and everybody else was volunteer, which the volunteer fire corps in this country is beautiful. I love them. My son is actually a member of it. He's on a college scholarship for football, and to say thank you to the community that houses that university, he's working as a volunteer firefighter when he has time. So couldn't be prouder. Third generation of firefighters in the family now. So it's an honor. And I'm proud of that kid because he chose, right? Like he could have gone and learned to code, but he decided to serve, and that's not me. I might be an example that he looked up to, but at the same time, he chose. With what we see on the job and our exposures to cancer, all credit goes to my kid, not to me. Anybody who tells me good job, I'm like, I'm lucky I didn't screw him up, and I'm proud of him, right? That's just how I look at it. But regardless, what I'm getting at is service to community, service to the country is. My granddad served in World War II. Stepfather served Vietnam era. He was drafted. So my loyalty to this nation is absolute. And being part of the political system, and then using it, watching how it works, and then I started studying social engineering. Basically, I wanted to be a fire chief, which means domestic terrorism is a requirement. I mean, 9/11 showed us that. So I started studying those things on my own because it wasn't really part of the curriculum for any of the professional development we were doing. And so I started looking at things like the Overton window and how society gets shifted slowly and incrementally to accept more and more abuse, and then abuse victims accept more and more abuse because I don't want the abuse because this is already bad, so I'll just go ahead and sit in this bad. But they moved it incrementally. That's the Overton window. And if you look at our educational system, it was incrementally moved through George W. Bush and No Child Left Behind to what Obama built, and then the hodgepodge between these three different terms that these radical swings, right? So how did these radicals get onto these tickets, and how does that work, and how do we defeat it? That's what this episode's about. So what I was taught is the golden rule for all politicians. A sitting politician will not listen to anybody, a constituent, unless they are a registered party member of the same party who regularly votes in primaries, because all they have to do is win the primary election, and then the general election system just kind of takes over because the CD always goes red or blue. Now, when you have contested seats, that's when all the money comes in, and you see and I've knocked on doors. I've done all that stuff for different jurisdictions here in the valley that were trying to improve their fire service. All of my political action was to improve the fire service for the public. So they taught us that, and I'm like, dang, that's it. You know what? Like it matched what I'd been seeing in society by that point. I think I was like 30 at the time. And I was like, man, that's a pattern to watch, right? And I'm bringing up some recent stuff. The land sales aspect of the whatever the Trump administration called their spending bill. That had this huge public outcry, right? So that's the kind of the wild card to the to the foundational rule. If there's so much public outcry, you're losing your base, you're losing the competition, you're going to lose everything. Then that something will shut down. And thank you to every person that is a content creator in this space that's spoke out at that point to get that land grab stopped. So do you see how these two rules work in tandem, right? You see mass outcry. Okay, we'll listen. That's we the people. But what we do is we outsource our civic duty to a representative. That's the Republic. Now, the only time that we could get a say is during that primary. And I'm going to explain how this all works. And then I'm going to shatter some perspectives too, by the way. So if you don't show up at the primary, you only have the desperate and the devout. What do I mean by the desperate and the devout? It's young kids who don't want college debt, and it's old people who are worried about losing their benefits. Those were the two target markets for us when I was in that game. That and the other sweet spot is the nuclear family, right? So these three, they participate. Anybody who's like in a hodgepodge in the middle, iffy. Most people kind of vote just to say, hey, look, I did something. And then what they do is they then offset their civic duty to a party who then does their bidding, right? So what you have to start to look at is, are these people serving the party or are they serving the people? And when you realize that the entire re-election apparatus that comes in for that general election is from the central party, they then have to do the things that keep them in that that financial pipeline, and then that gets fed by what I call the governmental industrial complex, because what we were warned about as the military industrial complex has now universally gone through all levels of government. That corruption is just like it's apex primate C, apex primate do. It's just copy and paste, and hence all the misspending, right? Anyway, so if we now know that they only listen to somebody who's in their party and votes in the primaries, well, what does that mean? It means you need to register to a party and you need to vote in primaries, and then they'll start listening to you, period. That's all it means. You need to pick a party that most aligns with your view of the world, and you need to then go vote for candidates that are centrist, not part of this radical side. Because again, I talked about like the devout, the desperate, and the devout falls in with that nuclear family too, right? Or true believers in a political system. That's the other devout that's in that pile. So we got to consider all those, all these interests, and that's what it takes to lead this country, is look at this beautiful hodgepodge of all of the world who came here and was like, I can set my own destiny within this system. I want that. So this hodgepodge needs representation that takes all of this into consideration. And these people, they have doctorates in this stuff. They spend their entire lives understanding how small populations move. And I'm gonna get into that too. So let's get back to that primary system though. So if we register in a party and we then find a candidate that we know is gonna serve the will of the people, we get them on the ticket in the primary and then we back them up in the general. That's how it works. We can win, okay? If we continue to say it's broken, it's corrupt, and you don't participate, this is what we get. Let me give some spice to this. The common narrative is that Barack Obama is the most popular modern president. Okay, that is a gamification of numbers. It's a marketing strategy based off of the fact that he had the largest turnout, which was only like 61% of the population or something like that. It was less than 2/3, right? It was above 60%, but less than 2/3. So smaller than 66, more than 60. So that means if you got in a time machine, went back to 2008, you walked down the street and you saw 3 people, only 2 voted. And 1 voted for one and 1 voted for the other, and the third didn't participate. So was that really the most popular, right? Because when you look at how much pushback the Obama administration gets, that third person who didn't vote, that is where those like kind of inflated, that bigger than is perceived pushback against the man comes from. It's from that third that never shows up and votes and just complains anyway. We call them squatters in the military. We have a term in the military of owners, renters, and squatters. All right, there's owners who are trying to do their very best to do their duty and leave the place as good and better than they found it. There's those who are just there to get the stamp on their resume so they can sell it later in life. And then there's those who had nothing to do in life. They've always been screw-ups. They've come here. They've started to do their old stuff with the other screw-ups. And there's this old quote from antiquity: out of 100 soldiers, only 10 shouldn't be there, 80 are targets, and then 9 are the real fighters. We're lucky to have them. But the one, the warrior, he'll bring the rest back. Think about any group you've ever worked in. That pretty much applies, right? Teachers, there's 1 teacher that's a banger, 9 they're awesome, 80 they're just getting that check, and then there's 10 that have blue hair. It's like I see it everywhere in society. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you will. But I get back to like this owners, renters, and squatters, right? So if you walk down the street in 2008 and 1 out of 3 people was a squatter, they're just showing up, right? So that's where you see this bigger pushback. And that third that's not participating, they're screaming because they're getting screwed, but they're not participating, right? So that's where like this larger than the election data shows us pushback comes from, right? There's this like reserve of voice that is not part of the data that's being sold in the mainstream media that's also talking back. So I digress. So if we think about that, during the most popular president only got 1 out of 3 people to like them. That's a completely different concept, right? Now let's get back to how he got on the ticket. So I did some research. There's like 230 million. You might have to. I used Grok, used AI to reference all these numbers. I want to say it was 230 million Americans were registered to vote during that time. Out of that 230 million, what percentage do you think put Barack Obama on the ticket? It's only 7.6%, 17.6 million voters. So that just means that that group I talked about, the devout, the desperate, and the people who want either the benefits to get the new benefits that are being promised, free school, always offered, never given. The banks won't allow that. Anyway, their whole prospectus and quarterly earnings model is based off of the revenue from student loans. It's their business model. What are they going to do? And like everybody's like, we're going to get rid of that. I'm like, good luck. You have no idea the complexity of that system. Regardless, so this third that's going to get free school shows up. This third that is hoping they're not going to get their Medicare shut off, and this third that has this hope going forward. But it's only 7.6% of the voting population put that man on the ticket. Oddly enough, Hillary Clinton got 7.8%, so a man took a woman's job. She won. I mean, she got, we talk about, this is what a democracy looks like. That's what the left pushes. And we talk about getting rid of the Electoral College. Their system in 2008 took a woman who got more votes than a man and said, you sit down this time, we're putting this dude in. And it came down to gamification of the delegates, and you can go do the research. And there's actually appropriately referenced and respected research on that. Again, I got all this from Grok, so that don't be mad at the messenger. Go talk to Grok, see if what I'm saying is wrong. It's kind of a cool tool for content creators if you think of it. It just kind of occurred to me, right? Like you can come up here and make a huge argument and be like, don't be mad at me. I got this from Grok. So, but I'm just trying to put perspective to it. And I actually had, kind of an in-depth conversation with the AI about this perspective. And it was like, yeah, you're right. I'm like, cool. Well, I think it's programmed to make you like yourself, so keep talking to it, but that's a whole other conversation. Regardless, he only got 7.6%. She got 7.8%. The delegate game is what got him on the ticket. We get him for 2 terms. And he says, we're 5 days away from fundamentally changing the United States of America right before he gets elected. What did he mean by fundamentally changing us? Like, the Republic works. That's how we've gotten everybody's civic rights to the point that they are. Yeah, we've had assholes run this place for a long time. But like, we're at a good spot right now. Like, why are we going to fundamentally change something that's working? Right? That's a question to ask yourself when a man that powerful speaks. The depth of how you break down what he said is everything. Now, I have a ton of other pushback against the Obama administration, also the messaging of the time. You couldn't say anything about what he was doing or his policies or his beliefs because of the color of his skin. That's a complete social censorship through leveraging our, ancestral guilt for the sins of this country. And it's a powerful tool. They used it with success for a long time. I just never listened to it because I'm not a racist. Like, I was born in 1981. They drew DNA and they're like, you guys are all the same. And I was like, go science. And at the same time, I believe science is, the tool that we use to understand God's gift of existence, right? That's where I come from. I'm a believer that, take science as an absolute awesome, perfect tool to make our lives better. So call that a strange worldview if you want, but it seems to have been working for us for a couple thousand years. And it worked for some other people before that, and that's a deep conversation if somebody wants to have it. But we have a system of governance right now that's we the people, and it's being manipulated, and we are falling for it. And we got some sort of like Stockholm syndrome en masse or something. And I just want to kind of like show you that Oz is a man, and this is just a show, and that we can just show up at the primaries and put on better people. Real quick on Barack, the Obama administration. He had 2 years of Senate and House control, all Democrat House control. See how many of his campaign promises he brought to fruition during that season where he could have it should have been just a rubber stamp green light. It should have been like the Biden administration with pardons on the way out the door, right? For the policies that he promised the voters that sent him there. But go look at the percentage. Go ask those questions. Start to ponder, right? Is some of this messaging to get a return on investment? It's exactly what it is. Once Fox had that lawsuit where they won in court that the news could also, under the First Amendment, is also opinion and entertainment, that's the new business model, and everybody copied, right? So it's like everybody blames Fox News for lying, but it's like as soon as that won in court, everybody started doing the same thing. And like, that's what nobody was like nobody had that math in their head during the pandemic. Again, I watched all this stuff since I was a kid because I was in a service job. I was like, literally, I was like watching Alex Jones because I was like, what are the domestic terrorists talking about? And then like he was telling me this stuff, I was like, I should look into that too. But yeah, I could see how this could drive somebody through the roof to go do something heinous. So yeah, that's a maybe we should tone it down, Alex, but and keep the meat on the bone. But that guy's been proven right, so many times it's ridiculous. And he got Sandy Hook horribly wrong. And yeah, like he should have been held accountable. Absolutely, he screwed that one up. But he's also got people feeding him crazy shit all the time, and he lost his mind. Regardless, I've looked at all. Obama said this famously: "Hey, stop watching Fox News and check out the Huffington Post." I used to read both so I could get the conservative and the liberal at the firehouse yelling at each other, and I would just laugh at them. And then I'd go watch the Daily Show and get a different perspective, and then I'd go read stuff online, and I'd be in chat forums and whatnot of veterans and other first responders, and having much deeper conversations than the average person. So I'm looking at all this, and I'm going, well, like, why doesn't anybody have a channel or getting this information out? And then I picked a fight on X with a Navy SEAL, and he told me to do it. And since I already have a channel, here's the episode. So I'm actually going to send this to that guy, and hopefully he sees the message. But going back to the whole point, 7.6% put Barack Obama on the ticket of the most popular president that is messaged through the fact that 2/3 of the people showed up, and only one of those 2/3 elected him. But that for we the people, we got what we paid for, right? We didn't show up, we didn't do the work, we didn't investigate the candidates and see where they came from, who they were about, what they were about, who they were. We just said, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and I'm not here to back candidates. I'm here to break the system, right? I'm here to show the system so we can break it. So it's up to you, the viewer, right? You're the reason. Your time is everything. If I've given you information that's of benefit to you in your life, share this, cut this up, use it, right? Knowledge is only power when withheld for power. It's liberation when given freely. So I'm giving you the knowledge that I built, doing something substantial for a small community in the desert. And then I watched that pattern play out again and again and again. The sitting politicians follow an agenda, and they don't move unless their base moves. They only listen to registered party members that vote. Independent messaging, that's to get us out of the rational people are all in the middle, and they're not participating, and that's why you're getting these radical candidates, and nobody can understand it, and it's just that simple. So I just would like to offer that as the argument for how we got these radical candidates. It's we the people's fault. We need to look in the mirror. I can tell you, I live in a Democrat stronghold. Everybody I vote for, like even the Republican I voted for in the primary for the Senate, was Mark Lamb. He's a local guy, served. It was versus a woman that was a reporter who hated the fire department and was just a very vile person behind the scenes. But being in a Democrat-controlled area, all the polling that I saw before the primaries would be like, who are you going to vote for? Ruben Gallego or Carrie Lake? And I'm like, where's Mark Lamb? This is pre-primary. And being a guy who has bought political ads and mailers and things like that in run-ups, I went, oh my God, they're leaving his name off because they have better numbers against Lake in the general. So while they're getting their data, they're even using, they're even, just by leaving a name off, because it's not forward of mind, right? Famous quote from the White House when that elderly abuse victim was in the front seat. But the game is so complex, and unless you're in these areas and you know what's going on and you're looking at it, you'll never see it. It just is what it is. So I'm here to show you the pattern that I've seen, what I see it, how I could see it working. If we were to, there's this call for a new party, great. I would actually like to see a constitutional amendment, and I know that's a bold statement, but a constitutional amendment where all voters get to vote in every primary, and they pick their favorite candidate from each party. Stop letting the parties run the system. Let us run the system. That constitutional amendment would fix the whole thing. Because I could sit down and go I'm not voting for that radical leftist. Nope. So, and then the left would look at the radical right and be like, nope. So we would get centrist candidates who then represent the will of the people. That would fix the whole thing. That would break the wheel, as Daenerys would say in Game of Thrones. But we just accept what they give us, and then we complain about what we got, and we're not engaging. So the only way to do that is to make either your sitting politicians hear you, listen to you, and follow you, or this next election, load one of the parties, put a candidate that's committing to that concept onto the ballot, and within a couple election cycles, we can get that done. That's the beauty of our system. It moves slow so that tyranny can't take over. During a pandemic, that we saw the problem in it, because that same system can be gamified by the litigious nature of society. I'm going to go ahead and break this down real quick. I try to keep these things under 30 minutes because a sitcom time frame is about the average American's attention span. But during the pandemic, we were in a panic, and we were being yelled to trust the science. And then the science was telling us to put a brand new unproven technology into every human, which is anti-science. Okay. Anytime you use science, you go, okay, I have a hypothesis. All right. And now I'm going to test it out on this group, and I'm going to leave this group alone to see if I'm right. Mandates are anti-science. So when people say trust the science, they're not speaking for science. They're speaking heresy, right? Like that's what they would say in the religious sector. So and I'm a believer. So and I'm also I was a paramedic. Science has been my life. When you're saying trust the science and it's not science, I don't have to listen to you. And that's the beauty of the gift of choice that we get from our Creator. That's the beauty of the First Amendment, where we're allowed to do, we're allowed to understand that and make our own decisions on our own personal experiment, which is our body. And I don't care what you believe. I think that's something we can all agree on. And I'm just blessed to be part of from backgrounds that understand that, and we hold that devoutly, and we hold the line. As a union officer, I sat with my chief and I said, I got members that are telling me they're walking off this job if you mandate. And he said, nothing's tying my hands yet. And it sent chills on my spine. What that meant was that if he had superior orders, he would follow them. And if you know anything about Nuremberg, that defense never works. Now you know why I'm retired. We got conditioned to follow experts, and we forgot to rely on our own expertise. We forgot to ground ourselves in the fundamentals of things like science and basic human rights. That was we the people. So when we judge any period of time, we need to look in the mirror. Fear of losing your status in life or your quality of life will make people do crazy shit. I forgive everybody for what they did, right? They're just, fallen creatures doing their best. But we cannot let it happen again. So, mandates are unconstitutional, and that would be something I would like to see as a constitutional amendment too. Anyway, sorry, for the depth of this one. I hope it made sense. I hope, you understand now, registering for a party, getting into the primaries, backing an actual candidate that's going to serve the people and not a party, that changes everything. We have the time. 2026 is around the corner. Let's have the conversation. If you're a content creator, I've sent this to you and you think this is a conversation worth having, please hit me up. Some other fun facts: I've lost 200 pounds and corrected an enlarged heart, reversed prediabetes, all with diet and exercise. I'm on no medications. So I got some opinions about the Make America Healthy Again movement too. So with that paramedic background, it's nuanced, and it's got some teeth to it. But what I'm getting at is, I woke up one day and said, I'm not doing this anymore. I would like for everybody to do that. And the only way we can do that is by participating in the republic that we inherited. We've been given a gift, an opportunity. And if we don't use it, we're going to lose it, just like Reagan taught me when I was like this tall. Okay? So get your shit together. Talk to your micro tribe. There's this thing called Dunbar's number. It sits at 150. That's the most emotional relationships you can have with people. People with a higher acumen for leadership can do it with more, and that's why they become leaders. It's like that 150 is middle of the bell curve person, right? And then if you think about it, you're only really tight with about 150. So think about that when you think about your micro tribe. You're a loving person to that 150, but if something's in competition with that, fuck you, get away from me. At our most fearful after 9/11, we were given a phrase by our leader, George W. Bush, which is, you're either with us or you're against us. And I think that societally we've carried that into our political arenas, and that's what we're seeing with that vitriol in the middle. There is something going on. There is a great struggle for power at the top. And I don't, who's driving it, what's driving it. That's pontifications while you're playing a game of pool or round of golf or out hunting. But at the same time, they're conversations worth having, and that's this space. That's the alternative media space. So let's stop talking about that gamification at the top and who's going to jail. And let's start talking about putting candidates on that we don't want to send to jail because they're serving us. Right? That's the fix to this whole thing. So like, share, all that ding. I don't know how any of this crap works. Again, I want to be on a fire truck. I don't want to be doing this. But I feel we need to, and I feel called to, because I saw something, and as much as I can say about Hillary Clinton, if you see something, say something, right? And that's, again, alternative media. So if you're a content creator, I've sent this to you, and you want me to come on, please let me know. I'm retired, work for a great company. We're going to change the way we train firefighters from the ground up. Hopefully stop some of the insane cancer rates we're seeing. Another deep conversation I can have with you. Again, if you have any questions, want me to break something down further, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'm going to get more formal here in the coming weeks to get this engagement a little more enriched. But I thank you for your time. Time is the only guarantee, right? You never get it back. That's something, again, we can all agree on. And make sure you're spending your time, filling your head with knowledge that's going to serve you and your people, so that you can, live the best quality of life, live that American dream, that promise. And I believe it should be offered globally, but I'm not in charge of the globe. I'm in charge of my chunk of dirt, and we all are, and we need to come together and figure out how to put leaders in there that are going to do that for all of us. So that's my hope, that's my message, and that's kind of the way I see it in the plan. So till the next one, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and appreciate you.